Hello, learners. This is Mulenga Besa, here to make a presentation on the examination answer techniques in CA1.4 Commercial and Corporate Law. The presentation's objectives are simply that we want to orient students or the learners on examination answering techniques in the commercial and corporate law paper. The scope of the presentation basically is fivefold. It is based on the Zika commercial and corporate law syllabus and focuses on the 5 things that I mentioned earlier. 1, we are looking at the table of contents in the, of course, Zika study manual. Secondly, we are looking at the expected competencies that we, as of course your helpers in your course of learning, are expecting from you. And then 3, we are looking at some of the common mistakes that students actually exhibit, of course, arising from the works that you do in terms of your examinations. And then 4th, we are looking at some answer techniques that we have prepared to guide you on how you are supposed to go about answering your examination questions. And lastly, we are basically going to provide some practical examination questions on topics on the Zika syllabus on the CA1.4 program. So we start with unit number 1 of the CA1.4, which basically talks about outlining the Zambian legal framework and the sources of Zambian law. So unit 2 talks about the law of contract or the law of contractual obligations. Unit number 3 talks about the sale of goods. Unit number 4 talks about employment law. So at the end of this course, students should be able to basically understand or do the following. 1, students should be able to identify the Zambian legal framework and the sources of law in Zambia. Secondly, students should be able to identify the law relating to contractual relations. Thirdly, students should be able to identify the law relating to sale of goods. Next, students should be able to identify the law relating to employment relations. Then students should be able to identify the law relating to principal and agency relationship. And then students should be able to identify the law of torts. And then lastly, students should be able to give a legal, or identify the legal responsibilities of business organizations that is under, of course, corporate law. So unit number 1 basically talks about the Zambian legal framework and sources of law in Zambia. Now, under that topic, the most common mistakes that arise as we look at what students write, in the examinations are, first, there is a general failure on the students to be able to identify the Zambian legal system or the Zambian legal framework. Secondly, there is a general failure on the students to be able to identify the sources of law in Zambia. Thirdly, there is a failure to be able to distinguish the status of the different categories of law that we have in Zambia here. So from what we have said there, I can give an example, a classical example of some of the questions, that you are going to encounter, of course, drawn from an examination of December 2019 paper. I basically pick on question number 1 from there. And question number 1 from that paper was talking about or asking students to identify what the 2 main general sources of law basically are. And then from there, of course, what you have these different multiple choice options that are there. Now, for multiple choice, I must actually mention that for multiple choice, if you're dealing with multiple choices, you need to be able to identify, the precise answer. You won't have to explain anything. So it's either you've got the answer wrong or you've got the answer correctly. So from what I have asked there, there are 4 options that are given in terms of the likely answers that are there. So it says, what are the 2 main general sources of law? A is talking about courts and judges. B is talking about the president and ministers. C is talking about courts and parliament. And D is talking about customs and international law. Now the question is, what are the 2 general sources of law? Of course, it can't be A, because when you talk about courts and judges, you're basically talking about one and the same thing, because judges operate in courts and courts are, of course, occupied by judges. So you completely disqualify A. And then when it comes to B, you cannot say the president, because the president does not make law, of course. From what you have learned in your CA 1.4 module, we learn about the 3 organs of government, and then we know that each one of the 3 organs basically performs a particular function. And the president, together with his ministers, they don't make law. We know that what they basically do is to administer the affairs of running the country. So equally, you disqualify that one there. It therefore means that the 2 likely options that you would have is courts and parliament, or customs and international customary law. But again, on that one, since we are looking at the sources of law in Zambia here, we are not talking about international law. So it cannot be that, meaning the last one as well, customs and international customary law, we disqualify it, meaning that we are left with only one, which is courts and parliament. Courts make law that are basically known as precedents, and these precedents bind. They have a binding effect. They become law once they are made. And then, of course, parliament is the institution in the governance of a country that has been given the power by the constitution to make laws in the country. So it then leaves it with C as the correct answer to that question. So these multiple choice questions, they can be very tricky. But of course, if you do understand your subject very well, you should not have any challenge really addressing or answering the questions that are presented in the examination question papers that you are going to be looking at or confronting yourselves at a later stage. So from there, we see that the questions, present what we equally refer to as some working terms, or generally known as command words. So every examination question that you are going to have, it has requirements that you as a learner basically will be expected to address. And in this question, the command word basically is about identify the correct answer. So it is simply about identification, in which case you do not need to make any explanation of anything whatsoever. All that you need to do is to be able to identify the correct answer from a number of options that have been presented to you. So here the command word is identify. But there's so many other questions that you are going to encounter. You are going to find so many other different command terms, and therefore you need to be able to understand and appreciate what the requirements are arising from those command words that are going to be presented before you. Okay. Let's look at another one of the units. So the second unit here, we are looking at the law of contractual obligations, which simply means the law of contract. That is the only meaning of that, contractual obligations. Of course, these are obligations that as individuals we enter into, which are binding on us. Now, there is law that guides or regulates these obligations that we actually enter into. So arising from that again, when we are marking, one of the most, or not even one in fact, the common mistakes that we find from what the learners present to us, as examiners, are mainly, the failure to identify. Again, it's about identification. The failure to identify the existence of a contractual, relationship that exists in a scenario that will have been given in an examination question. So the first is failure to identify existence of a contract. Second, you're talking about failure to identify the elements of a valid contract. I'm sure you have learned from your module or from your Zika manual that there are elements that are supposed to be in a contract, and that is what we expect you as learners actually to know. Thirdly, it is the failure to identify factors that may vitiate a valid contract, meaning factors that may actually invalidate, a contract. So from what we have presented here, it means that from the Zika manual, those are the salient points that we as examiners actually expect every one of the learners to have very, very good knowledge of. And those are the things that we actually examine the students on. One, existence of a contract. You must be able to see from a scenario that is given to you that there is indeed a contract that exists from this scenario that has been presented. Secondly, you must be able to know, what elements constitute a valid contract. Because there cannot just be a contract unless you know what those elements are, and you see that those elements actually do exist, then you can say that a contract does exist. Then lastly, we expect that you should be able to know the factors that may actually invalidate a contract. A contract can be made, but at a later stage, the courts actually have the power to declare a contract void. Now, what are some of those factors that may actually cause a contract to be vitiated or invalidated? So that is one of the things that equally we expect you as learners to be able to understand or to know. So again, I'm going to give an example of an examination question that was set in, or sat actually, in December 2019, where a number of options from the question had been presented, and from that, of course, you expect that only one answer would be the correct answer to that. So the question went as follows, and it says, the call for bids during an auction sale is example of, I'll repeat that question. It said, the call for bids during an auction sale is an example of. So there are 4 options to that question. Option number 1 says an acceptance. Option number 2 says an offer. Option number 3 says a consideration. And then option number 4 says an invitation to treat. Now you're talking about an auction sale. In an auction sale, it is very, very different from where you actually go into a shop to buy. When you go into a shop to buy, we are told that, you, the person who is buying, you are not actually, you have not been asked there, or you are in a shop, perhaps I should say. You are in a shop as a person who is making an offer to the person who is selling. You are not accepting an offer. There is no offer at all that has been made to you when you go into a shop. We know that when you go into a shop, what you find there is simply what we refer to as an invitation to treat. You are being invited to go into an agreement with the owner of of a shop. So there, you need to understand that as the basic principle of what really constitutes a valid contract. So from the options that we have, when there is a bid during an auction sale, you're not being invited at all. You're not being invited, as the case happens where you go into a shop to buy something. Neither are you accepting an offer, because you have not yet been given the offer. There is no consideration there. There is no consideration, because consideration, as you already know, is something that shifts from the offeree, to the offerer. So from the question that we have here, one of the options must be the correct answer. Now let's go back to the question and then be able to identify one of these options to be the correct answer to what we have. It says the call for bids during an auction sale is an example of what? Is it two options there we have? So let us eliminate acceptance. Let us eliminate acceptance, and let us eliminate, or perhaps let us eliminate invitation first, because invitation operates within the context of a shop, where you walk into a shop and then you find the price tag, and then that is what we refer to as an invitation to treat. So let us start by eliminating D. So you remove D, and then you also remove consideration, because consideration is that which eventually you give out in acceptance of the offer that has been given to you. So it then leaves us with only two options. It is either that bid in an auction is either an acceptance that you make or an offer. But remember that you are the one to do what? To accept. You are the one who is supposed to do what? To accept. So that acceptance can only come from you, but a bid is not coming from you. The bid is coming from the one who is actually selling. So that is what then we refer to as an offer. So the auctioneer is making an offer to you to sell whatever it is that they are selling at the price that they have indicated. It is now for you to accept the offer that has been presented to you. So here, between the two likely options, that is acceptance and an offer, the only correct answer there can be there is B, which is an offer. So you need to, for you to be able to answer that question properly, you should be one who has a very, very good knowledge of the elements that constitute a valid contract. You're talking about offer first, you're talking about acceptance second, and then you're talking about consideration. All these are in the options here, but the context is a different context altogether, because here we're talking about an auction sale. And in an auction sale, of course, the one who is auctioning, as mentioned, is actually making an offer. And you to whom the offer is being made, you are accepting. So you can't be the one to accept so as to, you can't be the one to offer in the context that we have here, but you can only accept, meaning the auctioneer therefore is the one who is offering. So the question, the call for bids during an auction sale, is an example of basically an offer, and not an acceptance, not consideration, and not an invitation to treat, as would happen where a person walked into a shop. Okay, now from there, again, you see that the command word is identify. The command word is identify. And for all the multiple choice questions that you are going to encounter, the command word basically is one. You are simply required to identify. So we may not even need to be going through, the command words at this stage as we are considering multiple choice options in terms of questions that you are going to encounter in the exam. What you need to know is that through and through, what you'll be required to do when you are confronted with a multiple choice question, simply to identify among the different options that have been given to you, what the correct answer basically could be. Okay, let us go to the next point. Now the next point here is unit number 3. Unit number 3 talks about the sale of goods. Now, under that topic, again, we do as we did for 2 and 1. We start by looking at what some of the common mistakes are when students actually attempt to answer questions in an exam. The first that we identify as a common mistake is that there is a general failure by students to be able to distinguish between a contract of sale and a contract of hire purchase, or perhaps a hire purchase agreement. There is a general failure on the part of the students or the learners to be able to distinguish between a contract of sale and a contract of hire purchase or a hire purchase agreement. Secondly, there is a failure to identify the distinction between a warranty and a condition of what? Of contract. Thirdly, there is this failure to be able to distinguish sale by sample and sale by description. And if you don't understand these 3 points that have been mentioned, it means that you cannot really successfully attempt a question in an exam based on the sale of goods, because this is the fulcrum. In fact, those 3 points that we have mentioned, that's the fulcrum of what the sale of goods basically is about. We are talking about either a sale, which is a contract of sale, or a contract of sale by hire purchase, or by hire purchase agreement. You're talking about what a condition is of a contract, and you're talking about what a warranty to a contract basically is. And then it's either the sale that is there is one by description or one by what? By sample. Let me just say something about these 3 points. Of course, it should become very, very simple for one who has read the Zika CA1.4 module that, a sale or contract of sale, is where, upon exchange of money, the buyer having to give out money to the seller, the title to whatever it is that is being sold immediately changes what? Hands from the seller to the buyer. So once you have paid the sum of money known as the price in a sale of goods, in a sale agreement rather, in a contract of sale agreement, once you have given money as a buyer, and then you are given the goods or the products that you are actually paying for, there you have actually owned whatever it is that you have paid for, and you have all the entitlements and all the rights to whatever it is that you have bought. That is what is known as a contract of sale. So contract of sale means that upon exchange of money and what is being sold, the buyer actually has the right and can do anything that they wish to do with whatever it is that they have bought. On the other hand, when you talk about a hire purchase agreement, the hire purchase agreement does not give you entitlement to whatever it is that you are paying for until you have paid the very last amount, that is the purchase price of whatever products or goods that you are actually buying. So let me give an example. If you are buying a vehicle, the price of a vehicle is 10,000 kwacha. You are going to pay a down payment perhaps of 2,000 kwacha, and then you are going to have installments of perhaps 4 installments that you are supposed to be paying. Once you have paid the 2,000 kwacha, you are not entitled to the vehicle, no. You are only going to be entitled to ownership of a vehicle in a hire purchase agreement upon completion of the full purchase price that is actually going for the product or for the vehicle, in this case, that you are actually buying. So in the event that you actually abscond in any of the payments that you are supposed to make to the seller is not going to come to you and start demanding that you pay the remainder of the monies that are remaining for you to do what? To complete the sale that you have entered into with them. The seller is going to come to you and say, I'm taking back the vehicle because you have actually failed to pay for the vehicle. you are going to say, but what about the money that I have already paid? The seller is going to say, but equally you enjoyed the full use of the what? Of the vehicle, and therefore I'm now taking it back. You have failed to pay the remainder of the monies that you are supposed to pay for you to own outrightly this vehicle that basically we agreed for you to actually buy on what? On hire purchase. So you see the distinction that is there. In a hire purchase agreement, ultimately, the owner owns whatever it is that they are selling until you have finished making all the payments that are supposed to be made towards that. Whereas in a contract of sale, the moment you pay, then you get whatever it is that you have paid for. Even when you are buying it on credit, you know, it's a different matter. Even when you are buying it on credit, for as long as it is a contract of sale, once you have paid and then you have got what you've paid for, you become the owner of the thing that you have actually paid for. The owner, if you fail to finish up paying where it is a credit, can only come and demand that you finish paying the what? The money. Cannot come back to you and say, bring back, you know, what I sold you because you have failed to finish the payments that you are supposed to make. That can only be available to the seller in what is known as a contract or a hire purchase agreement. So that is the distinction that is there. So one, hire purchase, it is the subject matter of a sale that belongs to the seller until you have finished making all the payments that you are supposed to make. And then in a sale of contract or contract of sale agreement, immediately you pay, you are entitled to the products that you have actually paid for. And then equally, we're looking at what, you know, a warranty and the condition basically is. This is something that is actually a very, very complicated thing, not only to the learners at this stage, but equally to people who may be experienced in these things, you know, to understand what a warranty is and to understand what a condition, you know, of a contract is. It may not really be very straightforward. And some even mistake, you know, what is known as a guarantee and a warranty. That again is a very, very different point. But of course, we're not concerned with guarantees here. We're concerned with a warranty and a condition of a contract. Now, a warranty is a guarantee actually. A warranty is a guarantee to you who is buying that what you are buying, you know, should it break, you know, should it break within a period of warranty, let us say within a year, what you are buying, should it break within a year or should it fail to do what it has been intended for within, for instance, a year or 6 months? Us as sellers, we will accept you bringing back what you have what you have bought, and we shall repair it for you. We shall repair it for you, and once we repair it for you, we shall again guarantee that it shall be as good as you had initially got it when you first got whatever it is that you buy. So you see what I mean when I say that a warranty is more like a guarantee, only that you are being guaranteed a service that if this thing that you have bought breaks within a stipulated period of time, you can bring it back and we shall be able to do it, to fix it for you at no cost to you whatsoever. But what you cannot do in a warranty is to say, I want to rescind the contract because this thing that I have bought does not work the way I expect it to work. The courts are not going to accept that. Once you have bought something under a warranty, the court will say, if it breaks, you are entitled to have it fixed. You are not entitled to it being what? retained so that you can then be what? Be compensated or refunded whatever the purchase price of that product basically was.
Take your career prospects to the next level with Zika.
Our diploma in accountancy is an essential qualification if you're planning on entering the accounting profession.
The Zika tax program at both certificate and diploma level equips you with an enhanced understanding of the field of taxation.
Our diploma in public sector financial management is ideal for accountants or trainee accountants working in the public sector.
And CA Zambia, a respected designation designed to ensure that graduates are highly trained to hold senior positions in the workplace.
You can study through flexible options like self-study as well as part-time or full-time through our accredited tuition providers.
Zika sponsors the top CA Zambia graduate to the One Young World Summit for Young Leaders and also offers scholarships to the top university accountancy graduates from recognized universities.
Visit zika.co.zm now for more information or find us on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Don't delay, your future awaits.
This is a matter that came, in fact, before the courts of law in a case of Benston Parmesan Motors, Benston versus Parmesan Motors, a case of 1987. Quite an interesting case where, you know, a sale was made of a vehicle which after 2 weeks, had a very, very serious problem in the engine, to a point where the engine actually seized. And then the buyer of the vehicle decided to go back to the seller and say, I'm rejecting this vehicle because it has failed me in 2 weeks of having used it. The courts rejected that claim by the buyer and said 2 weeks was actually good enough time for you to have known whether there was something serious about this vehicle to entitle you to return this vehicle, or simply to return it on the basis of a of a warranty, and not to have the contract repudiated or or rescinded basically. So the court said that that agreement was entirely not based on condition but on warranty, that the fact that the vehicle would move, and it did move in fact, was a condition of a contract. That the vehicle may have some, you know, latent defects that may not be seen at the time you got it, which could then be fixed at a later stage, and thereby not warranting rejection of the vehicle. The court said that then became a warranty. So it was a warranty, the court said, that you could not actually reject and ask for a refund based on the fact that, you know, 2 weeks after you drove this vehicle, the vehicle's engine basically seized. The court said the sellers have actually offered that they can fix the vehicle for you, and they can actually take the vehicle to a position it would actually look as if it was brand new and coming from from a showroom. So a warranty, among other things, does not entitle you, the buyer, to reject the goods that you have bought in event that they fail, in event that the goods you have bought fail or they break. The only thing that a warranty will basically entitle you to is a repair, you know, and not to rescind the contract and to get a refund. So that is one point which is very, very crucial when it comes to a warranty. So a warranty, in other terms, is actually a guarantee, only that you are guaranteed that if this breaks, we shall be able to fix it for you and it shall be as good as new. Whereas a condition, now a condition goes to the very, very core of a contract. The condition goes to the very, very core of a contract.